Hi, everyone. This is Carrie. Welcome back to day two of the West trial. Summary of what occurred today. This is kind of my favorite part of the trial because this is when they bring on the investigating officers to come in and just break down the evidence, right? They played in a police interrogation with Officer Hansen. And in that, Trezell made a comment that stuck out to me and he said, "Well, yeah, I searched for at least 10 minutes for the kids." As if that was, like, a long time, and I think the cops kinda came back at him with, like, "Oh, yeah, a whole 10 minutes, you know?" The detective points out that it was weird that the camera catch his vehicle, but no kids moving around. So, they saw his vehicle when he got in it to go look for the kids, that whole 6 minutes he drove around, supposedly. The police officer says there's no kids' footprints out there, specifically out there, and when he mentioned that, he was focusing on the east side of the house. Now, in the interrogation, Terrell makes it clear that he's taken on 4 children from the black community. Not that he's adopted 4 children that needed a home. He's breaking it down to where he's turning it into a race thing. When they had a search that we all know that Terrell and Jacqueline were not really involved with, there were helicopters, there were volunteers that were out there helping. The prosecution mentions there was a Nest cam from the neighbor. Nest is like a similar to a ring camera. And again, they pinpointed out that Trezell's van seen in these cameras, but they never see any pictures of the boys. There was also a ring camera footage on 108th Street that they obtained. And I guess that kind of leans back into him out there searching for the kids. Because this might be a good thing to start off with. I want to read this from Bakersfield 23 ABC. They said the trial of Jacqueline and Trezell West resumed today with Officer Brian Hansen taking the stand. Hansen is a patrol officer for the California City Police Department. During the time of the investigation of the Wests, Hansen was a field training officer for the department as well. He and his trainee, believed to be Officer Joshua Flores, were the first officers to make contact with the couple after Orrin and Orson West were reported missing. According to Hansen's testimony, he had searched the house for suspicious things, such as blood or torn clothing, while searching for the boys. Hansen also searched the backyard for any signs of footprints, which he received on the job training for. Hansen claims that he only saw one footprint in the yard, only a few feet away from the cement slab, and I believe he's speaking of right there off of the back door. Hansen also found a pair of slides near the back door, which he claims when he asked about the sandals, Jacqueline West said that they were hers. Orrin and Orson West were reported to be wearing Nike sneakers, according to Hansen's testimony. Police body cam footage of an interaction between Trezell West, Hansen, and Officer Anthony Cabrielas on the night the boys were reported missing was then played for the court as evidence. Hansen could not determine if the footage was from his or Cabrielas's camera when he was asked about it. Hansen confronted Trezell in the video, saying those kids didn't just walk away, while pointing out that there was no evidence of any children playing in the backyard and no footprints. West takes offense and argues with Hansen, claiming that he had searched for the boys and that it is the police's job to find them. Who says that? Who says that? You guys, there's so many things that Trezell did through all this that, now that I'm just on day 2, I'm like, this guy, ugh. Because in these interrogation videos, there are several times where you hear him laughing. I mean, these are just like a day after the kids have gone missing, and he's just laughing and cutting up with the cops. Hansen, who had reviewed security footage from a ring light doorbell, claims in the video that he not only saw no signs of the children in the video footage, but he also did not see Trezell properly searching for boys. You're being defensive because you're being caught in a lie, Officer Hansen accused Trezell. You don't even care about the welfare. You're caught up in the lie. The argument later takes a turn regarding race, but is quickly diffused. And that's when I left off here on my notes. And the video ends with Trezell and the officer cooperating with each other. Another video was played for the court, this time of an interview of Trezell West taken at the California City Police Department station. During the interview, Hansen informs Trezell that search dogs were unable to find any trace of the boys outside of the residence and that they may have been taken by a car. And then Trezell asks if that means his boys were kidnapped. And when he says this, guys, he's like, you mean they were kidnapped? Like he was so surprised by that whole, like that was a possibility. I don't know. It's weird. And this is when Trezell goes into, well, the biological parents know where we live, which I found interesting because later on, when the police are speaking with Jacqueline, she says, well, they don't know where we're at. And again, this is all after they've already moved to California City. So later in the interview, Hansen says that security footage from nearby houses show no cars on the street near the house around the time the boys supposedly went missing. There was also no people aside from one man walking his dog around 4 p.m. that day. All right, then they took the break. So let me go back to my notes here. And on my notes, what I wrote down, what stuck out to me was them discussing the biological family of Orrin and Orson. They said the aunt had reached out to them at some point, and Jacqueline was the one that had the interaction with her. The police questioned how dogs didn't run away. Oh, this was another thing. The police asked him, well, if your back gate was open all this time, how did your dogs not run away if the gate was left open? So they have two dogs. Trezell's response to that was, well, they stay by me. They don't do that. They don't run off. And then I think it was brought up somewhere later on that the cops revisited that whole topic about the dogs didn't run off, but when we were out there, they did go outside the gate. I'm not positive on that. I'm going to look back on some other notes and see if anybody else caught that. They asked Trezell what his theory was of what happened. And he was like, I don't know. And he again brought up the bio family. Oh, the police department says, according to the police dogs, there's no evidence of the kids left the yard. According to the cameras, no one showed kids. Not one showed any children. Okay. Next page. I've got several pages here. All right. So then on December 23rd, which originally said December 22nd, and then they changed it to this was a December 23rd interview. Approximately 8:30 a.m. They go over to Trezell's mother and father's house, the home of Philip and Wanda West. This is where the other children were at the time. Now, interestingly, I did not know this, but apparently there's a special form that the police have to kind of fill out this checklist to see if a child should be interviewed or not, like if it's okay to interview that child. And I didn't write down what they called it, but I think two of the children were too young, but the 10-year-old and the 7-year-old, which I do believe are the biological children of Trezell and Jacqueline, were questioned along with the grandmother. Now, they didn't go into any details about that questioning yet, okay? I think that's going to come back up later. I think that's the prosecution's big thing. And I think they're going to dive into that on one whole day of questioning. Just my thoughts. Now, again, this was the 23rd, so it's kind of like the police are just still putting all this information together. They're not totally zeroing in back in on T and J just yet, although they probably had suspicions at this point. After he left the grandmother's house, he went back to the Cal City home. And they showed that body camera footage, and this particular officer was interviewing. He had an interaction with both of them, and then you could hear Trezell in the background talking to the other officer, and he was, like, laughing and cutting up again. But then it kinda leaned more towards going back into just speaking with Jacqueline. He did show both of them some pictures of people, and they thought one was the biological aunt of Orrin and Orson Welles. Now, Jacqueline told them that the FBI had been to her mother's house, Her mother's name is Maria Martinez. And the detective asked how long they lived in Bakersfield. Okay, so these are the questions that the detective asked them, like kind of a back to back questioning. He said, "How long have you guys lived in Bakersfield? When was the last time her mom, Jacqueline's mom, saw their kids?" And she stated that that was before they moved, that her mom didn't really interact with them a whole lot. He asked, "When did they move to Cal City?" He asked, "Where did they have Thanksgiving? Who attended Thanksgiving with the, because they had it at their house. Who attended?" They said, "Oh, it was just us." "Well, what did you eat?" And she said, "Well, we had turkey and that kind of stuff." "Oh, okay. The kids really like that." You're just trying to get them to open up, I guess, at this point. He then asked, "When was the last time that the boys spoke to Trezell's mom?" He then asked, "What's their day-to-day routine?" And, some of this was so low, I could hardly understand what they were saying. I kept changing from my phone to my computer trying to get a better audio on it. He asked what their day-to-day routine was, and she said, "Well, we school, cleaning, feeding the dogs, having the kids clean their room." Because he asked, "Well, what do you have the kids do when it comes to cleaning?" She's like, "Well, I have them clean their room. They don't really watch TV." In fact, I think she said something about no TV and that they have a lot of books that they read that are educational books. He asked them if they had any domestic issues between the two of them, and they kind of played that off, was like nothing out of the norm. Did they have any? Then he asked, "Do y'all have any money problems?" And she said, "Yes, because of the pandemic." And he goes, "Oh, yeah. So what do you guys do?" And Jacqueline says, "Well, Trezell does music and do art, and we sell a lot of stuff online." Which I was like, red flag right there, because that just goes back to the whole, oh, he's a musician, she's an artist. Neither one of them have a stable job. So, yeah, was the money they were getting from having these adopted children paying their way? It absolutely was. Jacqueline asked if they could stop media from coming in or coming around the house. And he told her that there wasn't a whole lot he could do there, um, as long as they weren't on their property. At some point, she advised him that the adopted children, other than Orson and Orrin, were 6 years and 7 years old. He asked him what the kids got for Christmas. He actually played on that a couple of times. And when she answered it, she just threw out like a bunch of toys. She never pinpointed, oh, well, this one wanted this and this one wanted that. So I kind of wonder if they looked at the presents and were looking at the packaging to see if Orrin and Orson had any presents that were wrapped under the tree. Because that would have been very interesting if they had forgotten that one little detail in their cover up. Allegedly. Allegedly. So he said, "So y'all sell art?" And she's like, "Yeah, we sell art online." And he's like, "So y- how do you guys get by then?" And she goes, "Well, we get so much a month from the adopted kids." I Now this is these are the notes I wrote down. So this is probably him questioning and her kind of giving answers, but basically what I found out was Orrin and Orson were the only ones being homeschooled. They last saw her mother, because apparently he had to ask that question again, you know, Jacqueline's mother. He's like, "When did she last see the kids?" And she said, "Well, she never really comes over here. And I go over there, but I would go visit her house, but I wouldn't take the kids with me. I would just go check on her. And then, that was about it. See if she needed anything." So then he asked, "Well, okay, so who helped you guys move?" And Jacqueline said, "Oh, it was just Trezell and I." And he said, "Wow, that was a lot. You guys moving just by yourself, got the van?" She's like, "Yeah." And he's like, "So that had to have been a lot of work with the kids, those kids and everything, and doing all that. You didn't have any family help." And sh I didn't hear much else from that. And then so that was kind of a gray area. I just remember the detective saying something like, "Wow, you didn't have any help. It was just the two of you guys." He goes, "Okay, let's run down the timeline again." So she's telling him, "Well, I was wrapping presents, I was cooking, and I also fed the cats." And he said, "Well, how long between when Trezell went outside and he came back in and said the boys had disappeared?" And she said, "Oh, about 15 minutes." And I think she said something like, he goes, "Well, where are they?" And she goes, "I don't know. They're not, I haven't seen them." Her response was like, "Oh, I haven't seen them." It was just kind of odd. Jacqueline did say that she knows who would want to take the kids, like who would want to kidnap the children. But this is the part where she said, "But they don't know our address, but they don't know where we're at." She said Orrin and Orson didn't get along with with her two kids, and that they both cried a lot. And the detective came back and said, "Well, yeah, they're like 3 and 4, right?" And she goes, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, that's common." He asked again what presents she got for the kids, and she never specified which kids got what, just named a bunch of toys off. Um, he asked about, like the timeline of them getting married, and apparently their first child was born when they got married the same year in 2010. So they've been married about 10 years when this occurred. They did have stockings hanging for all the kids. They had all the kids' name on them, and so they talked about that for a minute. He asked, "Can we swap your cheek for DNA?" And I believe that they let them do that. I didn't hear any kind of issue with that. Then he asked them if they could turn over their cell phones. And at first she thought, "Well, you're welcome to look through it or whatever." And he's like, "No, we need to take them. It's going to take some time to go through them, whatever and stuff." And she said, "Well, this is the only way I can contact my mom." And then you hear Trezell in the background say, after they explained more of what they wanted to do with the cell phones, he said, "Well, he didn't feel comfortable with that." And that was his only connection, to other people. And then again, you hear him in the background. I think he kind of used the excuse, "That's my only way of talking to my family." And they go, "Oh, who in your family do you, communicate with on the phone a lot?" Laughed. He goes, he didn't talk to his dad much. And he laughed about that. And he said, "Well, why don't you talk to your dad?" And it had something to do with his brother. I think he's his younger brother. He was lazy. And he said, "Well, when's the last time you spoke to your brother?" He said, "Well, it was at Thanksgiving." And then they came back and asked, "Well, do you guys have any FaceTime? Did y'all do any FaceTime, with the kids to the grandparents so they could see them and say hello?" And they both said, "No, we don't FaceTime." So it'll be interesting to find out if they have anything on the phone, if it tells them if they ever FaceTimed. I don't know. I'm sure it could tell them that. I don't know for a fact, but all right. So then when that interview was over, the prosecution brought up some pictures from the home that the police department had taken. And most specifically, Hansen had done this drawing of the home, and it showed their house, the yards, or it showed their home, including the yard, and then like a surrounding lot, right? And he had taken measurements so specifically of the field, the gate height, the fences, the height of the camera from the neighbors. What he was trying to pinpoint is, should that camera have been able to see the kids if they were in the backyard, in any specific areas of the backyard? So then they went on lunch, and when they came back, they played that infamous news conference interview with Trezell and Jacqueline that we've all seen, of them standing out in the street answering to everybody for the first time. And here's what the news had said about this, what I just went over. The news basically said Hansen had interviewed all four of the West's other children, which I don't know if that was exactly specifically right, because I heard him say he only interviewed two of them because the other two were either too young or they didn't pass that test. Okay, so during this last interview, when the police had gone to their house, Jacqueline reveals that the last time her mother had visited was before the West had moved into their California City home. She also says that her family was going through a hard time financially because of COVID-19, which I kind of went over, and they were selling less art. All right. Now, I've got to rely heavily on these notes here because this last part, and I wasn't honing in on what they were saying as much. So When they came back from lunch, the trial resumed with Hansen still on the stand. So this is that same officer all day, it seems like. He was shown a series of photos and they identified, okay, this is what I was just saying. They discussed some of the photos taken inside the house, and some of the details in the photos were like of unused diapers in one of the kids' rooms. Smith asked Hansen if there were any dirty diapers in the trash can, and Hansen replied that there were no used diapers in the house, something he claims he noticed because he has kids himself. Now, the defense said, oh, that's speculation. And they were like, no, I'm just saying, like, I've got kids, and usually 9 times out of 10, we got diapers in the trash. Hansen also claimed that there were 2 toothbrushes supposedly belonging to Ori and Orson West. However, the toothbrushes were covered in dust and stuck to the counter with an unknown substance. Oh, that's big. Hansen gave some details about how the FBI was on the case and that they became involved on December 22nd, and the Kern County Sheriff's Office and the Bakersfield Police Department were also involved. Then they played an interview between Trezell West, Officer Hansen, and an FBI agent at the California City Police Department. It was hours long. The video began with Trezell answering personal questions about education, work history, home ownership, religious views, and family life, as well as his reasons for adopting. Trezell also talked about his relationship with his family, mainly his 2 biological children. When talking about Orrin and Orson, Trezell mainly talked about how the boys came to be a part of the West family and how Orrin would cry a lot, especially when alone. He explained that the boys were separated from the other 4 children due to having issues and not getting along. I do remember him, in my notes, I did make notes that he had said something about he felt that Orrin, the 4-year-old, the older of the 2 boys, had kind of like abandonment issue. So, like, when Trezell would leave, they would get upset. After he talked about his family, Trezell began speaking about his dogs and how the gate in the backyard needed to be closed to prevent the dog's escape. Oh, so now you see how this got flipped? He claimed that his dog Mia would leave the yard, but his dog Violet would not, contradicting a recorded statement from an earlier interview that we just talked about. Okay. Trezell then began recounting the events leading up to the reporting of the 2 boys missing. He gave the agent and the officer more details, such as how he parks in the yard, how he does not let his children play in the dirt, and how the boys were wearing warm clothes when they went missing. Trezell then began speaking about his other 4 children, saying he would like to move on for their sake. Wow. Wow. This is on the 23rd, you guys. This is just a few days. He said he began speaking about his other 4 children, saying he would like to move on for their sake. He explained that his main goal was to protect all 6 children and that he was concerned about his main 4 being put into the foster care system. After Trezell expressed that fear, they asked him if his children would lie to the police, to which he responded that they did not lie a lot, but that he would not know if they would. Trezell was then accused of lying by the FBI agent, and as he revealed that Officer Hansen had interviewed all 4 children and Wanda West individually earlier that day. According to Hansen, each family member that was interviewed consistently said that they had not seen Orrin or Orson for weeks and possibly even months. While pushing for Trezell, and I apologize if I keep calling him Terrell because I keep messing that up. While pushing for Trezell to tell them where the missing boys were, he became upset with the FBI agent and Hansen before threatening to walk out of the interview. The agent left, but Hansen stayed behind to continue talking with him, playing good cop, bad cop. All right, so then after that, like they said, that was a lot of time involved with that interview, and they basically released the jury for the day. All right, so that's it for day 2, everybody. I imagine that I'm going to bet money that Hansen's probably going to be back up on the stand tomorrow, and we're going to see some more evidence, and they're going to start to kind of dig a little bit deeper on how they're linking all this together. So I will get all that updated for you in a nice little summary and shoot that out as soon as I can put it all together for you. And hopefully these help save you guys some time so you kind of keep up with the case and not have to sit through all of this. Thank you for watching, and everyone have a blessed day.